Good morning. Let the record reflect all supervisors are present, with Supervisor Parker, Alejo, Adams, and Phillips appearing via video conference, and Chair Supervisor Lopez appearing in person.
Mr. McKee, do you mind leading us in the pledge upon your return to the chamber?
Buenos días, mi nombre es María, estoy aquí para los servicios de intérprete en español.
There are no additions and corrections to this agenda.
Excuse me, I'm not hearing you from the chambers on Zoom.
Microphone's on.
Oh, that's
We
better.
need to turn up. Is that better?
Yep.
I'll scream into this thing. Here we go. Okay, so I have one item on today's consent calendar. Is there anybody in chambers who would like to speak to this item? Seeing nobody coming forward, I'll check the Zoom. If you're participating via Zoom and wish to make a public comment, we ask that you use the raise hand function in the participants tab. If you go to the bottom of your screen, click on participants. At the bottom of the pop-up, there's a raise hand function. We ask that you use that to be recognized. If you are on a landline and wish to be recognized to speak, please punch *9. That'll do the raise hand function on our end and let us know you'd like to be recognized. Seeing no hands going up for the consent calendar of the Water Resource Agency, I'll go ahead and bring it back to this board for any comments, questions, or action.
Move consent.
Second.
Got a motion from Alejo, a second from Parker. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Supervisor Alejo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Parker?
Aye.
Supervisor Adams?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Lopez.
Aye. We'll adjourn the Board of Supervisors of the Monterey County Water Resource Agency and reconvene on the public items on the Monterey County Board of Supervisors public agenda. Roll call, please.
Let the record reflect all supervisors are present, with Supervisor Alejo, Parker, Adams, and Phillips appearing via video conference, and Chair Supervisor Lopez appearing in person.
Any additions or corrections?
There are no additions and corrections to this agenda.
Okay, at this point, we're at the consent calendar. Are there any members of the board who wish to pull an item from the consent?
Yes, the 27.1, it was added by the Resource Management Agency.
Supervisor Adams?
27.
27.
Question.
Supervisor Parker, I saw your hand was briefly up.
That was for 27.1, and Supervisor Alejo beat me to it.
Okay, perfect. So at this point, I'll ask if there's any numbers that the public would like to see pulled for comment. See nobody in chambers. Is there anybody via the Zoom? It looks like I have one hand up. That's Mr. Lipe. If we could go ahead and unmute Mr. Lipe. Just give me the number at this point, Mr. Lipe.
Yes, thank you. That would be 22, 25, and 27.1.
Okay, we'll go ahead and put you back on mute. I'm going to start with 27.1, and I'm going to go to Supervisor Alejo for that one.
Yeah, this one, just because I'm a member of the Budget Committee, I don't remember this coming to our committee unless the chair approved it coming straight to the board. And then it's a significant amount coming from the cannabis tax assignment, and whether that would be reimbursed later. We could get just some more background on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Alejo, and I think Sean Ellery is stepping up too, and I think you're correct in your assumptions, and obviously Sean may address a little bit of that, and I'll try and chime in.
Good morning, Sean Ellerby, acting as the Section Finance Chief for the Emergency Operations Center for the County of Monterey. This item did not come to the Budget Committee. It was a rushed item that we asked to come directly to the Board of Supervisors in consideration of expenditures that we have been incurring setting up the alternate care sites. In particular, the one that is stood up completely right now is the Monterey Fairgrounds alternate care site, as well as a hotel in Moreno that we're also incurring expenditures on. In process right now are Sherwood Hall, as well as the Salinas Valley Fairgrounds. San Lorenzo Park, We now have 15 trailers located at that location, and that site is also ready to go, to my understanding. So this item before you today is requesting an increase in appropriations for those costs that we have committed today, extended out for the fairgrounds through July. What is not in here are any additional costs associated with standing up Sherwood Hall, as well as the Salinas Fairgrounds. Those costs were not known at the time that we were preparing this report. However, we are starting to receive invoices, so about making prompt payment to those vendors that have been so responsive to us in setting up these care facilities, which is the reason why we were asking for the increase or expedited review of this report.
Ms.
So
Ellerby?
I think it was alternative housing sites, but just the one follow-up question on that, is it reimbursable?
So for the reimbursable, FEMA may reimburse up to 75%. However, that's not guaranteed. That's making sure that the costs that we incurred followed their guidelines, their protocols, as well as are reasonable given the circumstances of this event.
And why are
Back to you,
we,
Supervisor Alejo.
why are we using the cannabis tax assignment when the state had allocated, I think, over $3 million for the emergency homeless aid program prior to that? That was a direct allocation to this, to the counties. And then there was another amount that was given to the continuum of cares, but why aren't we utilizing that funding? Or was it not permitted to be used as for such purposes?
So Supervisor, the reason we are asking for funds, that the costs so far that we've incurred do not qualify for those homeless funds, because at this time we don't have homeless people in those facilities, but they may be eligible for FEMA reimbursement as we are preparing these sites for alternate care, and then also the identification of homeless going into those sites.
Got it. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, while Ms. Ellerby is there, I wanted to, excuse me, just speak to this item because I think we are, it's really not ideal to get things like this kind of piecemeal. I understand we've been moving fast and there's, at this point, there may not be much of an alternative, but similarly, as we did during the storms, we had a whole matrix of what the expenditures were for, what, all of that. And I think as Supervisor Alejo has highlighted, it would be great to include in this map of what we're doing the various funding streams, and just making sure that we are applying those first before we get to the county funds. And I'd like to see the plan. And as with the storms, it's going to hit us in the pocketbook, but I think it's helpful to us as a board if we have an idea that it's as well thought through as we're able to do as we go along. And as I say, I know that we weren't able to plan in the beginning in terms of how we were going to pay for all this. We just had to do it. But I think this is a good time to say, all right, let's map out our strategy and where the funding streams are going to come from, and how, and keep track of what does get reimbursed and all of that, just the way we did with the storms. So if you and your team could look at developing that, then it can be sort of a standing piece of our briefings or our reports to the public each board meeting, just as an attachment. And if there's something to be said, we can say it, or you can, but I think that would be really helpful to us as a board. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Parker. Supervisor Adams, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I must say that I concur. My primary thought when I read this was that we would be able to put the money back into the cannabis assignment account after. But hearing your comments, it makes me realize that there's a very, very good chance that we will not get this funding reimbursed, even up to the maximum amount that we were anticipating. I agree with Supervisor Parker that we really should have a more comprehensive approach to this. So, and also what other funding sources might be available. And that was really what my question started with. Are there other funding sources that you were looking to?
So Supervisor Adams, I did attach in attachment E, I believe, or D, right now what other county departments have applied for additional grants that we have been awarded. Not to say that there won't be other grant opportunities coming up that we would be applying for, but for those that I was informed of, those are listed in attachment D. And again, these are just grants that have been awarded as a result of the COVID, not to say that the HAP funds that the county had received prior couldn't be used towards this event, assuming they qualify.
Thank you.
Supervisor Phillips, any comments or questions?
No, it's not ideal, but I don't think we have any choice about it in any other alternative.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to open it up to the public on 27.1. I know Mr. Lipe, that was one of yours. If we could unmute Mr. Lipe and give him his 2 minutes to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? I guess you can. Yeah, I see my name up.
We got you.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess the question I would ask is that you can, if you do get a FEMA grant, can federal money be routed back towards cannabis since it's not recognized by the federal government as a legal commodity, still viewed as a as a narcotic. In addition to that, I'm just curious as to what other emergency funding is going to come up, because I know the budget's already stretched tight. It was looking to be out of balance and short of funds necessary for over the next 3 years. And this was before the virus was even recognized or readily recognized by the public. So it's just very concerning. And also, you know, what utilization did this money go towards? Were any of these facilities actually used, and to what extent, and to what level of capacity? And I'm not saying the county should welch on vendors. It just seems like, again, I think it was mentioned by one of the supervisors about planning as to how how you plan to spend that money before it's spent, and then figure out after the fact that maybe it didn't need to be spent. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lipe. Any other public comments on 27.1? Seeing nobody coming forward in chambers, I'll look to the Zoom. I see no hands going up via the Zoom, so we'll move into our next item, which is 27. I believe that was Supervisor Adams.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I have a number of questions on this item. I'm concerned that the staff's report indicates that the work has been done on this ahead of our authorization of the contract. And I wanted to know why that happens and if it's standard practice.
Mr. Chair, this is Carl Holm. This is something that we've been working on with council with a joint defense agreement with this group. It is not common practice to begin a contract before we come to the board and get approval. But in this case, with the discussions we were having with the applicant, we felt that it was a special case.
Okay, so can you tell me then how, since you've been working with council, how the scope of this REIR reflects the court's decision and how it relates to the appeal process that's going to be going through the courts in parallel?
I know Ms. Gremlin is on the call, so maybe she could assist with that.
I was going to ask if maybe Wendy would want to take that one.
Yes.
Wendy, are you there?
Get you unmuted here, Wendy.
Mute. Thank you. Good morning, supervisors. Well, the county and the real parties in interest, Rancho Cañada Venture, are appealing the Superior Court decision in the Court of Appeal. The real parties are that would be Rancho Cañada Venture, are appealing the court's decision on the EIR issues. The county is appealing on general plan implementation issues that do not relate specifically to the project approval. Under case law, that enables the county to simultaneously, voluntarily, basically comply with the court's order. So essentially, we are proceeding on two tracks at the same time, while we are both, the appeal is pending at the same time at the applicant's request. The county is preparing a revised EIR to comply with the court's order. And that process, so a revised draft EIR will be prepared pursuant to this contract before you.
So another question to you then, Ms. Strimling. So the state of work is the scope of the work, however, should that not then meet the 50% affordable housing requirement that's applicable to the project under the 2010 general plan?
Well,
There's no option for that, nor is there one for 30%.
Okay, well, the court's order did not actually order a higher percentage of affordability. The court's order was stated that the project description was legally inadequate because it wasn't clearly enough stated what the project was. Was it the 130 unit alternative or the 281 original project? And then relative to that, finding that the true project was the 130 unit project, the county needed to redo the alternatives analysis so that you had a reasonable range of alternatives relative to the 130 unit project. The court also found that the county's finding that 20% moderate income housing was appropriate, as opposed to a 6% very low, 6% low, and 8% moderate. You can do that under your inclusionary ordinance, but you need to have finding of unusual circumstances supported by substantial evidence. The court said that there wasn't substantial evidence to support the finding. However, the court did not order 30% affordable or 50% affordable. In fact, the court acknowledged that there was a general plan amendment allowing for 20% affordable housing. That wasn't ever invalidated. The only reason the general plan amendment is now at issue is simply because of the EIR finding. So long story short, when and if this project comes before you, it'll be up to the board's discretion on a policy level, what level of affordability, and you would have a decision again whether or not to approve the project. I mean, this is assuming that the Court of Appeal doesn't reverse the Superior Court. So those are policy decisions, but right now that, to be made in the future, but the court did not order 30% or 50% affordable housing.
So would it speed the process up if we had the opportunity to have the staff, while they're doing this revised EIR, or when we're looking for somebody to do the revised EIR, if they did provide us an opportunity to look at what it would be for 30% or 50% affordable, so that we would already get the work done? It seems like that would speed up the overall process, rather than having, if in fact we had to come back and say, okay, now show it to us with a certain amount of affordable housing built in. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. Okay. So one of the aspects of the scope of work is a range of alternatives that are being proposed that the EIR would evaluate. And as part of this contract, the board could request that as part of one of the alternatives, the question of a higher percentage of affordability be evaluated. Under CEQA, the alternatives are more in the nature of alternatives that address the environmental impacts that have been identified, and whether or not there is a greater environmental impact from relative to the amount of affordability is like a factual question. But, you know, I think the board could, as part of this action, you could, for example, separate from this contract, just say, as part of the board order, that you request that that the EIR, draft EIR, look at an alternative with a higher degree of affordability.
Okay.
And then without making a decision, obviously, because you don't want to make any decision until you have the environmental review before
in front
you.
of us. And then finally, will this process require a new scoping meeting? Because I know the alternatives seems like they were kind of predetermined without any opportunity for public input to weigh in on what alternatives should be included.
Well, I think, you know, that is a determination I think that we made by planning and the EIR consultant. But I will say that when a county is revising an EIR pursuant to a court order, you're not starting over fresh. That's not what's happening here. And that, as the scope reflects, what you're doing is you are revising the EIR pursuant to the court order. And so there is, you know, this concept of res judicata, that is that the issues that have already been raised and settled in the litigation, or if the plaintiffs, for example, did not raise the issues in the prior litigation, you don't start all over again. So you don't get a second bite at the apple, might be the simplistic way to put what the concept of res judicata is. So, you know, I think that, you know, there isn't necessarily a legal requirement for a scoping meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I thank you very much for your comment, which really pleases me about, I can approve this, I can support this with the amendment to the scope to add an alternative project that would be, that would show more of an affordable housing inclusion to it.
Greater percentage of affordable housing.
Right.
Mr. Chair, frankly, I think that amendment's inappropriate. And this is it not for the EIR consultant, and the county will be reimbursed by the applicant for that? That's my question.
This is Carl Holm. That is correct. This is we have a professional service agreement with Rincon to prepare the services for a specific amount, and we have a reimbursement, a funding agreement with the applicant to reimburse us for those costs.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I do have one public hand raised on this item as well. If we could unmute Mr. Bill Lipe and give him 2 minutes.
Sorry, Chair. I was inadvertently disconnected from the meeting. I had 2 other items on the consent that I was looking to do, but I wasn't looking to talk on this one.
Not 27. Okay, thank you. Okay, I see Ms. Strimling has her hand up.
Yeah.
Ms. Strimling?
Yeah, I wanted to make one other response to Supervisor Phillips' question, which is, yes, while I agree with what Mr. Holmes said, the county will exercise its independent judgment in analysis, regardless of the fact that the applicant is funding through the separate funding agreement the cost of preparation of the revised EIR.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to head into item 22 at this point. Item 22 was requested to be pulled by Mr. Lipe. Mr. Lipe, you have 2 minutes to speak on item 22.
Am I still unmuted? Oh, there. Sorry, little delay. Yeah, it was interesting to me to see this, you know, this coming a couple of years after the ordinances have been drafted and the cannabis industry is basically, you know, been operating for a couple of years. And I think it's a good gesture to look at equity, especially in our community and for probably a number of folks that may have been sent to jail by the courts for cannabis offenses. It's certainly good to look at that. And I hope it's an honest effort because there been comments made recently about how difficult it is, even for the really well-capitalized operations to be able to make money in this industry in Monterey County. And there was numerous comments that they've been unable to really make any money and that they always struggle to pay their taxes. So while I applaud working on an equitable solution for other people in our community to benefit potentially by operating a business, the way it looks right now, based on just the comments from the cultivators, that it's a very difficult industry to make money in. And I just hope we're not setting people up for failure and getting extended and perhaps having to default if they get into this industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lipe. I see Mr. Cesar Lara has his hand up. If we could unmute Mr. Cesar Lara and give him 2 minutes to speak on this item.
Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Cesar Lara with the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council, and I'm actually in support of this measure as we kind of look at issues around cannabis. The one issue that we heard clearly when we did work early on around the tax measure, that we needed to look at the historical trends that the war on drugs has had in our community, in particular around cannabis. And looking forward to the Board of Supervisors authorizing this, and looking forward to working with the county to make sure that this phase 1 funding is used properly to really look at the historical trends in Monterey County and move to phase 2 of funding, hopefully to implement some of the recommendations that will come from this. So I really want to thank the county for pushing forward and applying for these funds, and looking forward to working with you all to make sure this is comes out really good for Monterey County, and we could use this in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. I just wanted to briefly say, I know we tried to apply the first go-round, and the state pulled back the entire process. And I know Ms. Iwamoto is here, and we had a lot of conversations as we went through that. So I'm hoping maybe you could just share with us how the application process went and what we're looking to do with this funding.
Thank you. Joanne Iwamoto, Cannabis Program. And yes, the state did pull back initially, but they revised the application process, and we were awarded the Tier 1 grant for $150,000. And this is, again, the Tier 1 funding is to conduct the equity assessment, and we will hopefully be working with Cal State Monterey Bay, and we've received support from the Sheriff's Office for data as well.
Thank you, Ms. Iwamoto. We appreciate that. Okay, so the last item, see no hands up from board members, that was requested to be pulled is 25, also by Mr. Lipe. If we could unmute Mr. Bill Lipe and give him 2 minutes on 25, which is looks like an HVAC contract.
Yes, it is. It is for an HVAC contract.
We need to unmute you, Mr. Lipe. We heard your first few words and then we lost you.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, it's for a little over $250,000, and it's I think being mandated by OSHA to get this done. And I just we were told, the public was told when this building facility was bought that it was a great deal, and it was cost so much money. And then I think it was $15 million. And then I think another $15 million or more was put into it to bring it up to standard, because it was an old building when it was bought. And I'll just throw it out there. The value of this property, I think after COVID-19, has been drastically diminished. The type of work environment that looks to be, even by the governor's standards and maybe just in general, the way things are going to be here, the new normal, I guess. It just seems like this building and this facility, in hindsight, of course, which is 2020, may be way more than we ever needed. And it may not even be practical. And so it's concerning, because I know the budget constraints are going to be very tight, and the need to cut is going to be very great. So I just bring this up as a concern. This is, obviously something that needs to be done to satisfy OSHA, but I'm just concerned about ongoing costs with this facility. And if things do drastically change, perhaps this could be looked at as you know, someplace where a really good place to actually be able to put folks in our community that are homeless in a concentrated area where they can receive the services, both health and mental services that they so desperately need, and that we've been slow to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lipe. Seeing no other hands up, I will entertain a motion to move the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion from Alejo, a second from Phillips. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Alejo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Parker?
Aye.
Supervisor Adams?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Lopez.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. And with that, we'll go ahead and head into our, well, I lost my spot here, our ceremonial resolutions. So those are items 3 through 6. Is there any public comment on our ceremonial resolutions? Seeing nobody coming forward, I have one hand up in the attendees, Mr. Vagnini. Can we recognize Mr. Vagnini and see if he has comments at this point, or if he'd like to wait until we talk about a particular resolution?
I'll wait till we talk about a particular resolution.
Thank you, and I'm going to assume the same is true of Mr. Dugan per my notes. So at this point, having no additional public comment, I will entertain a motion to approve ceremonial resolution.
So move.
Second.
I've got a motion from Parker, second from Alejo. Can we please get a roll call vote?
Supervisor Alejo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Parker?
Aye.
Supervisor Adams?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Lopez.
I'm a yes as well. Thank you so much. So at this point, we're gonna take a couple of these for comments, and Mr. Dugan will be my first speaker. John Dugan, I know you were up in the chat with your hand up. Can we go ahead and unmute him and let him speak to number 4, which is Building Safety Month in Monterey County?
Can you hear me?
We've got you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors, I'm John Dugan, Deputy Director of the Resource Management Agency. Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public about the critical role of our community's building code officials and inspectors to assure us of safe and livable buildings. No code, no confidence is the theme of the Building Safety Month, which encourages our citizens to raise awareness of the importance of safe and resilient construction for fire prevention and disaster mitigation. The resolution before you also recognizes the work of fire prevention officials, architects, builders, and others in the construction industry who work to ensure the safe construction of our buildings. Please join me in recognizing all of these design, construction, and safety professionals. And thanks for adopting this resolution proclaiming May 2020 as Building Safety Month in Monterey County.
Thank you, Mr. Dugan. We appreciate your comments. We're going to head to item 5, which is our National Public Works Week resolution, and we're going to hear some comments from Randy Ishii, our Chief of Public Works.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm Randy Ishii, Chief of Public Works, Resource Management Agency, Public Works. The week of May 17th, 2020 represents National Public Works Week. It's a week where the public is encouraged to support and understand the crucial importance of the public services that are provided by the county to its constituents and for the communities in which they live. Monterey County itself has approximately 1,250 miles of county-maintained roads, 175 bridges, the various county buildings and the grounds around the buildings, and of course the parks, which are maintained by the staff of the Resource Management Agency, Public Works, Parks, Facilities, and supported by their support function divisions within the agency. Some of the work of which have been accomplished by these staff members, ranging from the design staff who perform the preparation of plans and specifications for public bid and oversee construction contractors, or those who on a daily basis go out and maintain a building or maintain one of our parks, have accomplished some of our Measure X obligation projects, such as the River Road overlay last year from Chular to Limekiln, and other projects which they have done, such as the countywide safety striping project that recently has been completed. And there's various other projects of which the Public Works, Parks, and Facility staff have accomplished over the year and continue to pursue that you see in our capital improvement programs and annual work program for road funds. As I mentioned previously, the health and safety and comfort of our community greatly relies upon these services that are provided to them. And this week in general is meant to recognize the efforts on a daily basis given by your staff to provide for the safe infrastructure for our public. So with your board's support, please join me in thanking our staff and recognizing what they do in National Public Works Week.
Thank you, Mr. Ishii. I just want to briefly say thank you to you and your staff for all the incredible work that you do year-round. Not too long ago, but pre-COVID, I was out in Parkfield and coming down over the Parkfield grade, and I got stopped by one of your crews that was doing some repair work on a precarious grade with the excavator down over the edge. I briefly asked the gentleman controlling traffic if I could please stop and say hi to the crew, and he said, I recommend you not. Keep moving, please. Very professional and very to the point, but obviously focused on the task at hand, which is keeping the public safe and our roadways safe. So thank you to you and all of your staff for the incredible work you do every single day here to keep Monterey County citizens safe on our roads, and we're happy to support National Public Work Week. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I just happened to, this morning when I was taking the trash down, the Public Works crew was down about a quarter of a mile from my place in Walker Valley. They had it all blocked off, working to take a dangerous tree down at 7 this morning. So they were out there working.
Thank you, Supervisor Phillips. Supervisor Adams, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. Yes, I really want to weigh in with a deeply felt great deal of thanks to Randy Ishii and his entire team for keeping the roads and all of the work they do throughout the entire county, but especially in the 5th District, where we have so many challenges. But I think more than anything, I really appreciate what you're able to accomplish on an absolute shoestring budget. And I just don't want the week to go by without saying thank you for doing it in such a cost-effective way as well.
Thank you. Now we're going to go ahead and head into our next item, which was to adopt a resolution proclaiming the month of May as Older Americans Month in Monterey County. And I know that with...
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair, but didn't Mr. Vagnini want to make a comment? And I imagine that might be about a retirement in his department?
He did.
Or I don't know. I don't know what he wanted to...
Sorry, I'm not done with resolutions yet. I was...
Oh, okay. So sorry.
I was heading into the next resolution.
Okay.
Which I know we have someone here to speak on this one, and that's Nora Payton. Is Ms. Payton still with us in the panelist function? If we could unmute you to share some comments about Older Americans Month.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, you can, because I'm not muted. I don't get the hang of these that well. I just wanted to say that when we started our proclamation this month and we brought it to Supervisor Lopez, it was all about how many volunteers we have over the age of 60 in our community. And we came up with some examples that put the number of volunteer hours on its way to 200,000 in our county, which is rather extraordinary. And the Make Your Mark theme of this year is to recognize people who are volunteering, not just informally as caregivers and babysitters and companions, but also going out and helping other seniors and other people in our community. With the COVID-19 crisis, obviously, all of those volunteers pretty much have had to retreat, and it has put a real underscoring of how many people help our community. But it also underscores the fact that all of those people, having had something very interesting to do in their lives, are now isolated once again. COVID has done dramatic damage to our senior population, not just physically, but emotionally. I work for the Alzheimer's Association, and we see this very critically in nursing homes and hospitals, but also the isolation that our seniors face. And we hope this initially very uplifting proclamation will just be a reminder of how much we need to take care of our senior population. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. We really appreciate your comments, and I was happy to work with you guys to put together a couple videos to make sure the public knows about all the contributions that our seniors make here in Monterey County. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Vagnini. Mr. Vagnini is going to share some words with us about a retirement. You should be good to go, Steve.
Hey, can you hear me now?
We got you.
Great. Thank you very much, Supervisor Lopez, members of the board and the public. I'm not sure if Frank Soria is out there listening. I hope he is, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to make a few comments about Frank Soria. He started off his career at the Monterey County Assessor's Office in April 16th of 1984 as an appraiser one. In 85, he was promoted to appraiser 2, and then in 2003 he was promoted to an appraiser 3. He's been with us for 36 years. He's had a remarkable career. He is known as a specialist in commercial properties, hotels, motels, Mills Act properties, possessory interests, and reconciliation of very complex commercial appraisals. He was also the union steward for our office for many years. And a lot of county employees will remember him because he would sell See's candy for fundraisers throughout the county. It gives me a great deal of happiness for Frank that he'll be retiring, but we will miss him very much. And you don't get too many employees that last for 36 years anymore. And I just hope that Frank has a great retirement. I want to thank him for all his service. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vagnini. We appreciate your comments on the service of Frank Soria. And with that, we're going to head into appointments, which are items number 7 through 9. Is there any public comment on appointments? Is there any public comments via the Zoom? 1 second. I see one hand up, Ms. Mary Adams.
Thank you, Supervisor Lopez. I'm just questioning the dates on these. Example, reappoint Steve Snodgrass to the Workforce Development Board with the term expiration of April 26, 2020. And in addition, the appointment of Amy White to the Ag Advisory Committee of June 30th, 2020. And I'm questioning whether those are the correct dates.
We're checking to see what the appropriate date should be on both of those.
I'll come back on. And Mr. Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Phillips.
I had a question on number 9, just the background of Amy White. I don't know whether that's the former director of the Land Watch. I just interested if what the background of that person is.
I know that recommendation is made to the Ag Commissioner. I don't know if Henry's with us to make comments. Is he?
Chair Lopez.
Henry Gonzales, can you speak to item 9?
Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you now.
Okay, sorry. There was some confusion with this item 9 in that we couldn't open up the attachment for the resume that was submitted along with the application. And so we received this morning actually 2 different resumes. and the updated resume does not show the directorship over Land Watch in that the previous older resume did show. And so I'm not sure if the members of the Ag Advisory Committee were able to open up that link for the resume. Many of us tried this morning and we couldn't get it open. We had to call Ms. White to have her send us the resume, and then she sent us one that did list Land Watch, but then she sent us another one that did not, an updated version that did not list Land Watch. So I'm not sure if the Ag Advisory Committee members knew or realized that her Land Watch background. I don't know if they knew that when they voted to recommend her appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzales. I think what I'd like to do here, considering the fact that we don't yet have the dates for 7 and 9, is go ahead and kick those. And if we could vote on 8 and remove 7 and 9 for today, push those to the next meeting agenda. So if I could, I'd entertain a motion for number 8.
So moved.
First, I'm going to go to public comment. I'm going to go to public comment on appointments, which I think I already did, but I do see a hand up, and so I'm going to go ahead and reopen that. Mr. Lipe, you'll have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is for item 9. And I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I think anybody that's been involved in this public policy meetings and discussions and committees and boards knows that Amy worked for Land Watch. And I don't know why, personally, I don't know why that would be a hindrance. Amy serves, I know, at least on one other committee. I think it's the Basin Management Advisory Committee for the Water Agency. And I maybe understand if there needs to be something publicly documented for everybody to see. However, I've seen this tactic before where people call into question backgrounds, or they don't have enough information on who the person is. In reality, these are people that live in Monterey County. They're stepping up to serve. They shouldn't be maligned or pushed aside because perhaps they don't have the same thought process or perspective on certain issues. So I understand if you need to pull this back today, but I would certainly hope that this would be looked at in total and have the appointment made, because it just seems kind of petty to call in somebody's background unless it's, something really, really terrible, which I think we can all understand what those items might be, that people stepping up to serve shouldn't be maligned or questioned as to what their background or their opinions might be on certain issues if they don't happen to agree with everybody, especially supervisors. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Robert Roach with his hand up. We're going to give you 2 minutes.
Thank you, Supervisor Lopez. I can clear up the date issue because this was filling the remainder of an unexpired term, and the incumbent relocated from the area. So, I believe that term that is being filled expires in June, and the at-large member would be reappointed or not at that time. Thank you.
Okay, so bringing it back, again, my proposal would be to go ahead and vote on 8 and continue 7 and 9 to next week. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Motion from Adams, second from Phillips. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Alejo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Parker?
Aye.
Supervisor Adams?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Lopez.
Aye, thank you. That wraps up appointments. We'll head into other board matters and start with board comments. Supervisor Alejo.
I'll do it at the end, Supervisor.
Okay, we'll go to Supervisor Phillips.
What, this is for general comments?
Yep.
Well, we had a kind of the unusual Mother's Day because the kids came down and we had a social distance while we're at Mother's Day, so it was a little different than usual. And I spent Saturday the Rancho Cielo, I was out there a couple weeks ago and it was looking pretty shabby, and we got worried about the weeds that our crews being on social distancing. So we organized about 30 volunteers. Some of them were my age too, and then we had as young as 16 or 17 working to get the place cleaned up, and it was a good group. And the ranch then provided, I paid for a lunch for everybody who did the work for us. So we got the place looking good now.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing special to comment on this week, just a thank you to all of our county staff and community partners who are working on this, the COVID-19 situation. And I want to thank the public also for all the great work that everyone is doing in the shelter in place and staying safe and being good to each other. We really are flattening the curve. We're very successful here in Monterey County, and it takes all of us, and I appreciate everyone's efforts. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Parker. Supervisor Adams.
Thank you, Chair Lopez. Last evening, I had an opportunity to participate with Monterey City Councilman Tyler Williams to do just a reach out that he has, sort of his version of I think what Jane has and what I have. I know others do as well, just reaching out to people in his district. And it was great. It really worked out well. I felt like I was in a lot of people's living room, and it really felt very personal. I was really happy to feel that kind of inclusion. But where I'm going with this is that it's just so clear to me that as hard as we all try, there is still such a dearth of information. People are dying to have questions answered about COVID-19. And I cannot even, I just feel like we're all working so hard to get as much information out to the general public as possible. Yet every time I have the opportunity to participate in one of these community forums, the questions are just, from people's hearts to try to figure out what's happening, where are we going, what's the latest information. And I just feel like I want to bring that to our attention with tremendous thanks to the people who are working so hard within our county staffs, our county ranks, to push information out. And the work that I see coming out of the public health department is just amazing. And it's just still kind of tough to see the people who feel like they just don't know nearly enough. And I think it's because it is all so scary right now. And then in that vein, we're doing another fireside chat on May 20th from 5:30 to 6:30. And my guest will be Dr. Steve Packer, the CEO of Community Hospital of Monterey Peninsula, who will be providing information on his perspective on COVID-19. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Adams. Supervisor Alejo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, just like my colleagues, I want to really thank the community, all our county employees, and all our essential workers who continue every week to risk themselves to keep our economy going, those segments that can during this time. And so it's something to be commended for Monterey County. Our board has been working closely together. That's not always the case in other counties. Other counties are removing their orders, and now they're seeing spikes in their numbers of positive cases shortly after removing those protections. So I think we've taken a strategic and very smart approach, protecting public health, but also now starting our ad hoc committees that could start having the discussions and conversations with different segments of our business community, our faith community, our schools, to see how we could proceed in the weeks and months ahead of how we could reopen other segments of our county, but in a way that's going to help ensure public safety at its maximum. So I appreciate us taking that diligent and a strategic approach rather than just removing all protections. And I think our community and I appreciate that, but I think the business community also likes that message that we're having that thought and vision of how do we reopen segments in the smartest way possible. So I just wanted to just share that. And again, I'm glad the leadership from our governor providing additional resources to Monterey County, from the new testing to the masks that included agricultural workers. There's a lot of things that I think are going to make even more of a difference in the weeks ahead. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. I just wanted to share that this Thursday at 5 o'clock, we'll be having a South County Small Business Economic Impact Town Hall. Again, that'll be virtually online. We'll have some great speakers from the Business Council, as well as Lee Tekashower from Rural Development Company, and folks from the Pajaro CDC sharing what they're offering to our public in terms of programs to help businesses stay afloat in these critical times. I did also want to speak a little to Mother's Day and thank Supervisor Phillips for allowing me to cross boundaries into his district without any shots fired overhead. Teresa Matsui, a local orchid grower in my district, gave 1,000 orchids that we were able to distribute to families, specifically mothers, in the Pajaro area. And being part of that was something special. Watching a little food for the soul be distributed alongside food really impacted me, and took me back to interesting times, and being there and being able to see, even around the edges of a mask, the eyes curl up with a smile and sometimes a tear. It was special. And so I want to thank Teresa and her team for coming out. She brought 4 of her key employees out with her to help distribute those, and we had a great time alongside LULAC and others distributing food and flowers just ahead of Mother's Day. That was last Friday in Pajaro. So thank you again, Supervisor Phillips, for your permission to cross into your district. I appreciated that. As we continue forward dealing with COVID-19 and its impact on our community, I just want to continue to thank staff for all that they are doing every single day. I know it's not easy. I know it's challenging to work in these new ways, but know that your hard work is recognized, and keep doing what you're doing. We need you guys to really continue to step up, because our community appreciates all the hard work that you're putting in. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our CAO for comments and referrals.
We have no new referrals this week, Mr. Chair, which is appreciated. So, although we love doing the work that you assign. So, the only comment I would have is I'm going to disappoint Mr. Peterson today, so he doesn't get a tour of my house.
No new room today. Thank you, Mr. McKee. At this point, we're going to go to general public comments. I'm going to start with folks in the chamber, and I do see Mr. Peterson coming forward, so we'll start with him. And again, if you're participating via the Zoom, we ask that you use the raise a hand function to be recognized. Thank you.
I am still looking forward to the online tour. My name is Eric Peterson, and I'm going to get this out of the way. I'd just like to take a moment and thank Bill Lipe for what he just said, because he hit a lot of nails on the heads about what is needed in committees and commissions and various participation. Kind of reminded me of some years ago. I spent 17 years on Salinas Traffic and Transportation Commission, and we had a core of the same group for about 8 or 10 years, and one was a truck driver and this and that, one was a teacher. And Rob Russell, who was in charge of the commission for many years, used to like all the differences, because we would think of things that Public Works had not. And the more different opinions we get, the better things work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Seeing nobody else coming forward in chambers, I'll look to my attendees list via Zoom with the raise hand function. I have 2 hands up. We're going to go ahead and start with Mr. Lipe. Mr. Lipe, you'll have 2 minutes to share your public comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I didn't get a chance to say thanks to the Public Works Director for the county. I know I've seen him in a lot of meetings, and I know they do a lot of work. But what I might say about the frustration in the public, which was mentioned by a couple of, or at least by Supervisor Adams, the frustration in the public is watching the county Public Works and the Public Works within the various cities throughout Monterey County that are able to conduct a lot of work. There's a lot of signs out, there's a lot of work being done, and of course I commend those folks for working, especially in this environment. But I know other businesses and other workers are looking that can't go out and do that. And even though they might work outside, and even though they could present a plan as to how they're going to socially distance and comply while doing work, it's really, really frustrating. Folks are hemorrhaging out there massively. And y'all had a $90 million hole in your budget 3 years out, and this was before the virus. So I imagine that's ×2 or maybe ×3 now. So I know a roadmap was mentioned by Supervisor Parker, which I think is a great idea, but it needs to be detailed. Folks need to be able to understand when they can go about safely and within social distancing guidelines, go back to work, open their businesses, create revenue, not just to support themselves and their workers, but also to support the county and the local governments that are also hemorrhaging massively right now. So, it's good to be diligent. Of course, we don't want to deny the science, but this was only supposed to be for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and the curve is flat as a pancake. So I really hope that besides just a plan, there's actual implementation that's ongoing here in the coming days and perhaps the next 2 weeks. We can't wait until June or July to get this thing going. Just my opinion, but I think it speaks for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lipe. We're going to go to Victor Longoria. If we could unmute Mr. Longoria and give him 2 minutes to share his public comment.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to inform you that yesterday, Monterey County Management Council had sent each board member and the CAO and HR a memo requesting that we place an item that was taken off of last week's agenda. It was item 21. So if you can place it on today, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Longoria. And then I see Kevin Dayton has his hand raised. If we could unmute Mr. Dayton and give him 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I heard the discussion earlier about an appointee to a committee where there was some confusion about what was on the resume. And while I understand the comments of a couple people who said it doesn't matter, you did make the right decision on that, because we're forgetting here that information about appointees should be accessible to the public. The county government is a government of the people. And if the general public is not aware of the background of an appointee, even if everybody in the know knows all about it, then it's not proper, and the item needs to be withdrawn and the proper background information provided to the public at the next meeting. So I wanted to praise you for making the right decision concerning that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. See no further hands up. We will go ahead and close our public comment period and head into our 10:30 scheduled matters, which will begin with a briefing and update on COVID-19.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. We have 4 items we'd like to very briefly update you on today. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask our speakers to be very brief. The first item is a testing update from the public health group.
Hello, board members. This is Dr. Moreno, health officer for Monterey County. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Very good. All right. Good morning to everybody. So yes, I've been asked to talk a little bit about testing, and I believe modeling is on there as well. So testing is, as a reminder to everyone, testing is part of our containment efforts to fight this pandemic. And today we've had over 4,000 Monterey County residents who have been tested. And we have, of those, about almost 70% of testing has been done in our public health laboratory at the health department. Currently, we've got about, looks about 7% of everyone that's been tested thus far. 7% are testing positive in the community. That 7% is 7% of our sicker residents because we've been focusing on testing people who have symptoms and need to be hospitalized primarily. That may change, will probably change over time as we start expanding testing to people who have fewer symptoms and to people who have no symptoms at all. And our turnaround time in our laboratory is a day to turn around the test results to providers. The hospitals themselves have capacity to test, and they can run a test in about 30 minutes. So their doctors can get a result back in about an hour or two with the patient still in the emergency department to make decisions on a placement such as isolation. We also have recently. I'd like the community to know that every one of our hospitals have a capacity to do testing. There's capacity to do testing at some of our primary care provider sites like Soledad Medical. They're also able to do testing as well. And we're also continue to have a benefit of our larger commercial labs running tests for our providers as well. Just last week was the opening of the Optum testing service sites, one in Salinas and one in Greenfield. And after our first week, we have a total of 611 residents, and primarily Monterey County residents receiving testing from there. And we do have some people testing positive in that community, but we're still receiving, of those 611, we receive test results on some of them, and the test results are coming in every day. And so we're very grateful for the California Department of Public Health and the governor's office working with OptumServe to provide that additional testing for Monterey County. I want people to know that we are making pretty good use of our Salinas Optum site. They can test up to 123 people a day, and we're getting close to that goal in the Salinas site. But we are not maximizing the potential of our Greenfield site. So those that are listening, if you live in southern part of the county around the Greenfield area, please, you can go to our website and get the link or the phone number to call in and schedule an appointment. If you want to know if you're positive, anyone can get tested at these sites. You don't have to be a first responder, police officer, healthcare worker. Anyone can sign up and get an appointment and show up to get your test results. So if you're wondering if you have older people living with you or people with chronic medical conditions living with you, and you have to be out working because you're an essential worker and you want to know if you're positive, this is a great opportunity for you to do that. Let's see, and testing, I'm sorry, a couple more things. Testing is basically, again, it's our containment depends on testing. So we've been able to identify 288 cases in Monterey County. And we've been able to, our public health folks have been able to reach 98% of those confirmed cases and get them into isolation. For every case, we have about a little over 5 close contacts on average that are identified. So we've had about 1,574 close contacts that have been identified through our investigators, and we've been able to reach 97 to 98% of close contacts through the work that we do. So as we increase the number of testing opportunities for our county residents, we will see more tests turn out positive. And so we're planning ahead for that in reassigning and training more individuals to do case investigations and contact tracing. I'm going to switch over to just the second part, and that is the modeling. Modeling falls into the hospital surge preparedness. Hospitals have done a wonderful job in recognizing that there's across the globe and across the United States, there have been surges in some communities. And so the modeling that we do is within the context of hospital surge planning. And so we run the model, we put data in, and we share it with the hospitals, and to give them an idea of what a surge might look like as they continue. And they use that, if it's helpful for them, they can use that to continue to implement their plans. And now that we have Optum sites up and running, we're going to have more test results. And we're hoping that with the increased data that's coming in, we'll be able to rerun some of the modeling and share it with the hospitals for their use. If they feel it's helpful, we'll make it available to them. And that's the end of my report.
Chairman, the next, actually I'd like to combine the next 2 items, alternate housing site update and alternate care site update. Gary Millay is going to give the overview with some comments potentially by Mike Durr and Dr. Walls.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The county strategy for isolating people that are positive with COVID-19 and those that are high risk continues. We are utilizing hotels, our trailers, and our large facility alternate housing sites, in addition to the planning effort that is going into an alternate care site that will be primarily for overflow from hospitals if a surge occurs in which more patients are hospitalized than the hospitals can manage, and we need to utilize an alternate care site separate from the 4 hospitals. The planning process for that alternate care site is moving forward. Fortunately for the county, the measures that this board and the county have done to flatten the curve have been remarkable, and the consequence to that on the planning side is that where we thought we were going to have a surge much sooner in May or June, now it is pushed out until late summer or even into the fall. That has interrupted our planning process for using the site at the Marina Airport. So we are working with them to see if that is still a viable option based on their need to engage in business. And we are also exploring other options in case that does not pan out to be a viable spot for us. Our alternate housing sites are progressing. We do have approximately 90 people that are housed at this time in the hotels, and we do have operational trailers down in San Lorenzo Park if that need becomes available for people in that geographic area. We are continuing our negotiations with Sherwood Hall and Salinas. We're very close, and at this point, it's just some minor operational aspects that need to be modified to get them to sign the contract and move forward with making that a large facility in the downtown Salinas area. That's the end of my report. Is there any questions?
We'll take questions at the end, Mr. Millet. Mr. Chulo?
Thank you.
Yeah, last item, Mr. Chairman, is a brief update on food programs. I believe Lori Medina, our Social Services Director, is on the line.
Oh, there it is. Okay, now. Okay. Hi, this is Lori Medina. I'm sorry, it took me a moment to unmute. And with me, I have Elliot Robinson, who is a volunteer helping us with some of our analyses, but he's also the former Director of Social Services. So we're happy to have him back working with us. My part of the report was just to update you on some of the developments that relate to additional assistance that has become available as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So the first I wanted to address was really around working with our food bank, our local food bank. We continue to work with the food bank to determine, as the board directed us a couple of weeks ago, to figure out a needs assessment around our community needs around food. And we are working with the food bank to figure out a kind of a longer term assessment and approach to providing food to the community. We do know that the food bank is a vital resource for us. Through the board's leadership, the board did authorize over the last month or so, cumulatively about $500,000 of additional assistance to help with some of the really extreme needs that we are seeing that are increasing throughout our county. So we continue to work with the food bank in that respect. The other thing I wanted to say in terms of food bank assistance is through the Families First Coronavirus Act, there was an additional $48 million that was approved nationwide. We believe that California's proportion of that is probably going to be about Monterey County's proportion of that will be about 1.5% of the statewide allocation. So we're looking at probably somewhere around $650,000, $60,000, $70,000 that would be coming to Monterey County. It's estimated to hit our local jurisdiction sometime around June. We also wanted to bring to your attention that CalFresh has also received some emergency allotment, which equates to about $4 million over the last few months that will help supplement CalFresh recipients who were not at the maximum grant allocation. So that really, those were for the March, April, and May month time frames. And people are already seeing those increases in their CalFresh payments. The other thing that I would want to add about CalFresh is, you know, this will happen automatically for current CalFresh recipients, but we are still accepting new applications for people who find themselves in need for nutrition assistance. So people can still apply for CalFresh, and once approved for CalFresh, then they would be eligible for those funding as well. And then we also have the pandemic EBT program. This is really critical in terms of assistance for our school-age children who qualify for free or reduced meals through the school systems. And so to the extent that families already have EBT cards and services and are receiving funding on behalf of those children, they will see additional funding if those children are qualify for free or reduced meals. And again, for those who are not already on the EBT program, they can certainly apply. And this equates to about $365 per child in a family. Again, this isn't a monthly allotment, but again, through the end of the year, that funding that they would receive would equate to about $365 per child. The other program that I wanted to highlight for the purposes of this conversation, it's had a lot of interest, is the Great Plates Senior Meals Program. So this is a program that we have quickly been ramping up for. We've just finished the application process. We were approved. We have partnered with 211 to screen applications. And so what this really is a program that will provide up to 3 meals a day for seniors who do not have any other means of meal preparation, who do not qualify for any other type of federal nutrition program. They can apply for assistance, get meals delivered up to 3 times a day. This is also in partnership with local restaurants. So restaurants have been applying. They have been going through a state application process. Those applications are being ranked here locally. I understand we have so far more than 40 restaurants in the queue, representative of all of our districts. So that's the good news. And we are starting to get applications through 211 so that we can start implementation on that program. So we're very excited about that. Our community has certainly been asking about that program, and we are moving forward with that. And then the other program that I wanted to bring to your attention, and this actually was some new information that we don't have a lot of information about, but the California Department of Social Services is also going to be administering a disaster relief assistance program for immigrants. It is a project that is administered through the California Department of Social Services, but I understand that they will be working with local nonprofits who already have contracts with California Department of Social Services. This will allow one-time grants of $500 to $1,000 to families that are undocumented who need assistance as a result of losing employment resulting from the coronavirus pandemic. So I will stop there. That's my report.
Mr. Chulos?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our reports for today, and we'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'm going to go to board members first. Do I have any board members who would like to ask additional questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Alejo.
Going back to the testing with Dr. Moreno, I know the public is eager to, well, it was announced that we were going to start with the essential workers getting tested first. Is today, moving forward, a day to announce to the public that now appointments for the testing sites in Greenfield, Salinas, and Watsonville is now open to the general public? And so what's that number so people can call and start setting up their appointments? I know our goal is to maximize and use every testing slot available each day, and make sure those are being used by the public. But if you could elaborate if now the testing is open to the general public.
So thank you, Supervisor. So I would say, yeah, I think now's the time for people from the general public to start calling in and signing up. I had an opportunity to meet with first responders, police chiefs, fire chiefs, let them know, and we communicated with the hospitals and healthcare facilities, let them know that we really encourage them to have their staff sign up. And we still have quite a few empty appointments in Greenfield. So we really do want to make best use of this. So we'll be Supervisor will be sending out some notices, making some phone calls this week to get the word out that we really need to make better use of the Greenfield testing site. It's a wonderful opportunity that we have here in Monterey County on behalf of the state, and we really want to keep those testing services here in our county.
And Dr. Moreno, for those that live in North County, Pajaro, Las Lomas, Moss Landing, Royal Oaks, they could also go cross the Pajaro River and get tested in the city of Watsonville at the Ramsey Park Family Center on Main Street. That's available for North County residents to go to also, correct?
You're correct, and that's because the state is considers all the testing sites in California resources for all Californians. So if you have if there's a testing site that you go to the website and you find a testing site that's close to your house that's not in Salinas or Greenfield, by all means go to the nearest location.
So just for the public and our businesses, part of our reopening, one of the measures the governor has put out there is to increase the number of testing that we accomplish. So the more that we could encourage each other to get tested, and those that have any concerns that this is now available, they could call that number. Phone number is 888-634-1123, or you can also go online. The links are at our health department website. But there's these 3 centers, and I think we just want to make sure we get as much testing accomplished as possible, because as part of our reopening, that's one of our goals to do as well. So I think it benefits not only our public health and those individuals, but in this process of reopening, testing is one of those measurements, and we want to succeed in that as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. I do just want to briefly say that the website is lhi.care/COVID testing. One more time, lhi.care/COVID testing. I did use that website yesterday to sign up, and I got my test right away. I'll be tested tonight at 6:30 in Greenfield, and I recommend the public join me in doing that. It's important that we know what COVID is doing in our communities, and the only way to find out is through testing. So thank you, Dr. Moreno, and your team for fighting to bring those testing sites to our much-needed communities. Okay, I see Supervisor Adams has her hand up. Supervisor Adams.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I always get a lot of great information from it, and I appreciate everyone being here. This is a request to Mr. Chulos, I would expect, but I was just thinking that perhaps in one of our next updates on COVID, since we as the county are one of the largest employers in the county itself, I think that perhaps we could have a presentation from the education partners on the status of school planning for the fall, and just to ensure that we as a county are engaged in discussion with the education system to ensure that our workforce is considered and informed about what the options are going to be moving forward in education, since so much of getting back to work is engaged with having children at home and being unclear of what their processes are maybe that's something that we could bring forward.
Mr. Chair, we'd be glad to bring that forward to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chulos. Any other board members have comments at this point? See no hands going up and nobody speaking up, we'll go ahead and go to the public. And I see I have 2 hands up. We'll start with Mr. Bill Lipe.
Thank you, Chair. Bill Lipe from Monterey County. Just some questions on contact tracing and testing, and then about models. So I'll just ask these questions. Contact tracing, it was mentioned that there are people already being traced, and I assume that involves some sort of staff or personnel to do that tracing. And I'm curious to know if that money is included in the $3 million request that was done earlier in the consent, or if that's additional money needed for that type of thing. And for encouraging people to take tests, is that going to trigger more contact tracing? And is there staff and money available to do that? Besides that question, I'm wondering what the sentiment of people, the public at large, and perhaps, the part of our community that are undocumented would feel comfortable taking a test, knowing that could trigger some sort of trace back to them and their contacts. I think people's psychology is pretty rocked right now, and I think it would be best if people know what the consequences are of getting tested, besides hopefully testing negative. Also, I wasn't clear as to whether there was, since we do have condensed and dense housing throughout the county for all, a lot of working class families, not just agricultural workers, would testing positive trigger a potential home removal to isolate said folks from that home? And then real quickly to models, I have questions as to whether the models used were for urban type communities like ours or Monterey County specifically. And I'm also curious as to whether economic health and welfare was a consideration in the model. I'm not saying that it should dominate it, but hopefully, or at least I would hope that it was factored in some way into this. And I think we all know we have questions about models. We've been dealing with a model regarding water in this county that's been very frustrating. And I just want to say people are having a tough time trusting some of these things sometimes from the experts. So thank you, Chair.
Mr. Lipe. We appreciate your comments. Any other public comment at this point? Seeing no hands going up. In chambers, I have Mr. Peterson.
Name is Eric Peterson. Just 2 things. Regarding Dr. Moreno, he's been getting a lot of bashing and letters to the editor and email to the board, and I'm sure a lot of other venues. And I'd just like to say that as far as I'm concerned, he's doing an excellent job, and he deserves our appreciation, not our bashing. And I appreciate him. Last week, I spoke regarding homeless, mentally ill, and I followed up with email to Ms. Jimenez, who forwarded my email to somebody else. And one of 2 things happened. Either there was an email glitch someplace or the issue got blown off again. I bring this up again basically for 3 reasons. One is we've got homeless people who really don't understand what's going on. It's sad, but it's reality. And we need to make sure that they understand there's an issue going on here as best we can. Second, you got families of homeless people. Usually they care about their homeless person. Not always, but usually. And sometimes they will interact with their homeless person. If the homeless person is sick and doesn't know it or doesn't realize it, that can pass it on. And beyond that, the third thing is the homeless deal with us on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes we realize it and sometimes we don't. And that's another way somebody who may not realize what the situation is, may not realize they've got a virus, could unintentionally pass it on to somebody and just make the mess worse. As I've said before, we've got the situation pretty much under control compared to most other entities, and we need to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I see Steve Vagnini has his hand raised. Mr. Vagnini, we'll go ahead and unmute you and give you 2 minutes as well.
Thank you very much. I just have a question for either Jerry Malays or Dr. Moreno. I think I heard Jerry state that the surge projection has now been pushed out to late summer or fall. And I wonder if they could comment on that and if that's correct, and what is that based upon as a department head? That the safety of my employees is obviously a big concern, and is that what I heard? And if so, what is that based upon?
Thank you, Mr. Vagnini. See no other hands, we'll close public comment, bring it back. And Dr. Moreno, do you want to just address some of the contact tracing questions that were asked about who's going to be doing that, what our capacity is to do contact tracing, and how we're planning moving forward?
Sure. Hi. Again, Dr. Moreno, Health Officer, Monterey County. So there's a question about money for tracing. Up until now, we've been able to take our current employees in the health department and reassign them from programs that they're working on prior to COVID-19 and over to the case investigation and contact tracing. So those costs fall within the appropriations that our department received from the board during budget hearings. With more testing, yeah, we do expect to see more cases, and we are anticipating that. So we have, I think, another 12 individuals that we've identified that we're going to train and reassign full-time or part-time to work on the investigation. I do think that there are some people in Monterey County who may not be completely convinced that they should get testing. One thing that wasn't brought up, but I'm reminded about, is that up until now, an individual that wanted to get testing had to go to a healthcare facility. And if you're not feeling well and you go to the emergency department and you're primarily wanting to know if you have COVID-19, you still have to register with the emergency department. Emergency department physician will do what they're trained to do. They will evaluate you. They'll determine whether or not you might have COVID-19, and they'll also determine whether or not you need additional tests or treatment. So if you're not feeling well, it's still a good idea to call your primary care physician, but also consider you might have to go to the emergency department. But for those people who just want to get tested, up until now, if you went to the emergency department, you get a bill from the emergency department to get your test. Now what we have now is with the Optum sites, people can go get a test. If they have mild symptoms or no symptoms, they can go, and they're not going to get a hospital bill. They're not going to get an emergency department bill. They're not going to get a physician bill. If they have insurance, Optum will go ahead and charge insurance, but Optum's not taking money out of anyone's pocket to do these tests. So that's a big advantage. So if anyone was hesitant before to go because of they're afraid they're going to get a hospital bill, that's not the case with the Optum. So I want people to understand that, and that's why this is a great opportunity. We're also doing our best to make sure that everyone in Monterey County knows that these testing opportunities are for them, and the more people get tested, the less stigma might be associated with getting diagnosed with COVID. It's really more important that we as a community know that whether we're infectious or not, so we can take the steps we need to protect our loved ones.
Thank you, Dr. Moreno. There was also a question about modeling and the surge. Do you mind taking those as well? The question on modeling was whether we looked at a county like ours or a jurisdiction like ours, and the question was about the timing on the surge that Gary Millay referred to.
Right. So I think what I've been able to share thus far was that we were expecting to have a surge sometime maybe early June, and as has been mentioned today, our doubling time has improved. The rise in number of cases has been steady. It is increasing, but it's slow. So we're not anticipating, just looking at the curve that the model put out as an estimate. We're not approaching the peak like as we get closer to the end of May, beginning of June, we're not near the peak like the model suggested. So based on that, our hospitals, and in this case, the the team working on alternative care sites needs to make some decisions as to whether or not they're going to have the same target date, and will it align with the needs of the company out in Moreno. And so I think I'm glad that our ACS team has been able to utilize some of that information and plan accordingly.
And if Elsa's still with us, Elsa, there was a question which I know I've asked, and so hopefully you could shed a little light on it. It was about the access itself. I know for some folks in our community, logging onto a website and going through the process of entering multiple passwords might be a little difficult. So are we looking at other creative ways to help our community, specifically essential workers, get tested?
Sure. Good afternoon now. Elsa Jimenez, Director of Health. We are going to be reaching out to some community-based organizations in our county to begin to strategize how we could help facilitate some of our residents that may not have access to the web or not feel comfortable calling a phone number to register for the testing, to be able to hopefully set up times to help these residents register for a testing, either in advance of or the day of, to again encourage our essential workers and pretty much the general public now to go in and access this vital service that's been provided to us by the state. And as has been mentioned before, we want to make sure we maximize the 132 registrations per day per site, so that we can prove to the state that we have a need and a desire here in our county to continue to keep these resources here locally. So we'll be sending out more information as we as we develop those relationships and plans for helping our residents access the service.
Thank you. We appreciate your hard work. Any additional comments or questions from board members? Seeing no hands going up, we'll go ahead and head into item 14, closing out our COVID presentation, and consider the adoption of an ordinance amending 12-12-10 section of Monterey County Code regarding Carmel Valley Road and Portola Drive. We have Mr. Catalinio here with us.
Good morning, Chair, Supervisors. My name is Catalinio, Senior Civil Engineer with the County of Monterey Resource Management Agency Public Works Department. As they're setting up, let me just give you a brief overview of what I'll be presenting today. We are presenting a amendment to Title 12. Title 12 is a section of the Monterey County Code that contains the regulations related to traffic and traffic regulations for traffic control. The specific areas that we will be amending will be on slide 3. The sections related to establishing speed limits, the section related to two-way left turn lanes, and the section related to limited term parking. Next slide, please. In accordance to the government code, we need to present these changes at 2 hearings, one of which we did last week, and we also provided a lot of public notice in various publications throughout the county, physical postings on site as well as on our website, and interaction with the public directly, either by phone contact as well as working with our Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee for those sections along Carmel Valley Road that we're looking at the speed limits. In accordance to the California Vehicle Code, related to establishing speed limits, a engineering study is required, during which we look at a variety of things, including speed surveys and specific conditions of the roadways, type of vehicles, physical conditions in the area. All of these studies are done in accordance to the California Manual of Uniform Control Devices, and we take that information and, based on the recommendations of the studies, update Title 12 of the County Code to establish these regulations. The regulations need to be updated in order to have them enforceable by our partners at law enforcement, such as CHP. For this particular update, we focused on two areas, one of which is Carmel Valley Road, and the other is the Portola area in the Toro area neighborhood. For Carmel Valley Road, we are amending some of the zones as well as the speeds along the various sections of Carmel Valley Road. Previously, we had established a generally 45-mile-an-hour speed limit along the majority of the section. However, with feedback from the public as well as additional studies, we feel that we need to amend those speeds and the zone limits as presented on the next slide. In general, the 4-lane segment of Carmel Valley Road went up a little bit in terms of speed limits, and then we come back down to the lower speed limits as we're entering Carmel Valley Village, similar to what we had previously. The speed zones that are proposed are shown on the slides as well as in your staff reports. The other area that we took a look at is the Toro neighborhood. In this particular area, the traffic studies indicate that we can support reduction of the speed limit from 35 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour from the segment, generally from Reservation Road extending to the terminus of Portola. Next slide, please. Related to the two-way left turn lanes, there is a proposal for what is commonly referred to as a twiddle up on Salinas Road. We had concerns from the Fruitland neighborhood about trying to get out onto Salinas Road safely. Installing this two-way left turn lane would provide a safe haven area for them as they are exiting Fruitland and merging onto Salinas Road. The next item is related to the limited term parking. This one is up in Pajaro on San Juan Road, right in front of the Turkey Boat Cafe. In this instance, we are recommending a timed parking, a 20-minute parking limit that would allow safe and quick pickup areas for the business, especially in times like this where there is very limited, if any, in-house dining allowed. This type of parking limitation would allow patrons to come in, park, pick up any meals and such, and move on. Currently, there are no limits on the parking in front of the property, and it's often experiencing long-term vehicles parked along the frontage of this location. Next slide, please. Throughout the process, as mentioned previously, we've been working with the communities, trying to get some feedback from others to help better understand what's been happening out there, as well as some of the concerns of the local residents. In particular, with Carmel Valley Road, we did present this item to the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee. We did receive feedback ranging from speeds should be higher to speeds should be lower. But based on our engineering studies, we can recommend the speeds as presented in our report. Some of the feedback that we did receive is also related to sharing the roadway with bicyclists. There were concerns that modifying the speed limits may provide additional discomfort for bicyclists sharing the road in those areas that may have been increased, potential concerns of safety. However, in looking at the alternate routes in those particular areas, there are some separated bike facilities that do provide safer parallel routes to get from parts of the Carmel Valley area towards the mouth of the valley. Related to that, we've also looked at other ways to enhance motorist awareness of sharing the road with bicyclists. So additional signage can be something that is supported by the department to, again, provide that extra awareness. So in conclusion, staff recommends waiving further reading of the ordinance and amend the Title 12 ordinance as presented in the report to amend the sections related to speeds, the two-way left turn lanes, as well as the limited time parking. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Alineo. Supervisors with comments or questions. I see Supervisor Adams has her hand up. Supervisor Adams.
Yes, first of all, I just have to say, give such a deep thanks to Chad, not just for all of the time that he spent coming to the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee meetings, but all of the extra work that you've done on this report. In fact, I could go on for a long time with all my comments, but you covered every single point I was going to make in your presentation. It was just excellent. So I will not take further time to do that, other than, again, to thank you so much. I do hope we can do something about the safety for bicyclists, as you've already indicated. And my hope is that working with TAMC, we'll be able to expand on that parallel route that you had mentioned. And then again, looking at the surveys through for Portola Drive, I'm just so thankful that we're able to do something to give the people relief there. It's been a very hazardous circumstance. So I will not continue further, other than just to say thank you so much to you and to Randy Ishii as well for the excellent work you've done, and for listening to the community and responding in such a terrific way. So thank you very, very, very much. We're pleased.
Supervisor Phillips.
Yeah, I too want to thank the Public Works Department, especially there at Fruitland, which is a dangerous intersection. This will help be the first phase, and we've been getting a lot of comments about the parking on the San Juan Road. So I support the motion.
Thank you, Supervisor. Is there any additional comments from board members? Seeing none, I'm going to go to public comment. Any in chambers? Seeing none, I'm going to go to the Zoom, and I do have one hand raised. It looks like it's Eric Sand Mac Mini. So I'm assuming that that's a name and a device. We'll go ahead and unmute you now and give you 2 minutes to speak on this topic.
All right, gentlemen, members of the Board of Supervisors, thank you very much for addressing this situation. I'm a member of the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee, and I have, since 1966, when I lived at Mid Valley, when I was going to MPC, I have literally traveled the Carmel Valley Road thousands of times. These new speed limits are perfect. They are, the county is batting 1,000% if they approve these speed limits. I find nothing wrong whatsoever with these proposed speed limits, and I commend the board for proposing to make these speed limits permanent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. I'm going to go to Mr. Brian McCarthy next. You'll have 2 minutes to share your comments with this board.
Thank you, members of the board. I hadn't really intended to speak on this, but being that surrounding cities are still struggling with setting speed limits, I wanted to call your attention to a new task force report that was released in January. It's a state task force report that looks to look at some of the issues with what is called the 85th percentile method of setting speeds. And that's the method that no doubt was used in the engineering report that staff spoke about. The report talks about speed creep, which is a phenomenon that's happening on hundreds of miles of California roads, where each subsequent speed survey results in a raised speed limit. In addition, they say the 85th percentile is not supported by scientific research. It privileges driver behavior and does not consider different road types and road users like pedestrians and bicyclists. I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about this, to look up the Zero Vision Task Force report that was released in January, and reach out to your state legislators and show support for kind of re-envisioning the way speed limits are set on hundreds of miles of roads throughout California. There is legislation in the Assembly that is looking to do that, and it needs support from the public to move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Seeing no other hands up, we'll go ahead and bring it back to this board for action.
I'd like to move that we accept the presentation by the staff.
Got a motion from Adams. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a second from Supervisor Phillips. Can we go ahead and do a roll call vote, please?
Supervisor Alejo?
Aye.
Supervisor Phillips?
Aye.
Supervisor Parker?
I'm voting aye. I'm hoping what we're voting on is to approve staff's recommendation. I vote aye.
Correct. That was the motion.
Supervisor Adams?
Aye.
And Chair Supervisor Lopez.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Alineo. We appreciate all your hard work. At this point, I have on my clock the time of 12:28. I'm going to go ahead and give us a 5-minute break. Again, that's going to put us back here at 12:35 roughly, and we will finish the morning's agenda at that point. So again, this is just a 5-minute break for bathroom use. I'll see you all back in 5.